primarily a clinical department. Right? That's our main job, taking care of patients. Secondarily, we are a place that is focused on educating the next generation, because we all have limited lifespans in these jobs, and the need for doctors in healthcare continues. So education is really our second mission here. But I want to talk a little bit about discovery and why I think that's so important. And why do I think it's important for clinical departments, which is what fundamentally I think we are. I have no disclosures, but I want to talk again more about why surgeons in particular need to do research. So I personally think there are a lot of diseases and a lot of disease entities that really only surgeons care about very much. That the work to solve those problems is generally not going to be solved by our internal medicine colleagues or our pediatric colleagues, who are the main other sort of focus of work. And trauma was the first. There's just not a lot of internists that are out there doing research on how to improve trauma care and what are the metabolic problems that happen when somebody gets injured. And this is one of the fundamental initial areas where surgical research really took off. And then if you think about it again, we create trauma every time we do an operation, particularly in the days when all of our operations were pretty big, invasive kinds of operations. Also, we needed anesthesia. In our internal medicine colleagues, that was not a driving thing for them to figure out, how to develop anesthesia. Then there are the fundamental contributions that surgeons have made to advancing medicine. Transplantation is a great example. Transplantation was developed by surgeons. Now, did we have partners in immunosuppression and all of these other things? Absolutely. Did we have people who cared about renal failure and liver failure who were looking for solutions? But it was surgeons who made those things happen. Cardiac surgery is another great example. The development of cardiac surgery in the 50s and the ability to figure out how to put patients on bypass and really impact those diseases and change the outcome for coronary artery disease, is fundamentally developed by surgeons and surgeon scientists. I'm happy that once we come up with big, invasive solutions to problems, other people work, including surgeons, on how to make those solutions that involve structural change more minimally invasive. But fundamentally, these things would not have occurred without surgeons caring about making a difference and improving outcomes for their patients. Fetal surgery is another example, would not have been developed without surgeons who were paying attention to the outcomes of the patients. Those are just examples that you can think of off the top of your head. But I also want to say that not all surgical discovery and surgical disease outcomes get improved by people who are in academic medical centers. The ATLS is a good example of a technique that was important in improving the outcome for patients with trauma, but that was really developed by private practitioners, I believe in Nebraska, if I get that right. I must admit, most of this talk is coming off the top of my head because it was last week when Jerry said we don't have anybody to give grand rounds. Can you pinch hit? I said I'd be happy to, because these are things I care about. The other discovery, the really important discovery to the care of trauma patients and military patients and all of, and that's so important to patients we take care of, is ARDS, which was really defined, I believe, or discussed early on by somebody, a private practice surgeon in Idaho, as I recall. So the fundamental notion that you need to think about all the time what you can learn from patients and that we need to make a difference can come from any place, which is why I think it's important for all of us in training to be imbued with the notion that there are changes that are still need to be made, that advances that are still need to be made, and that any one of us has the ability to make a new observation. And whether you then become the person who affects the change or takes it the next direction doesn't matter. But each one of us has an obligation to think about, is there a way we can do it better? And that is the fundamental reason the tradition of M&M has long been in the field of surgery. Plus, what we do are acts of commission. We talk to patients, look them in the eye, say, I'm going to cut you open and make you better. I mean, that's a big deal. We do active things that can hurt people. So it's part of why it's been such a long tradition in what we do. So for me, coming here, seeing the great, rich clinical material we have to work with here, I mean, there are no more complex patients than the patients that we see, that we discussed today, really made me realize that this was an amazing laboratory for discovery that we needed to enhance. So with the recruitment of Sean, we now have what I consider the full complement of scientists to take us to the next level. And we now have 4 vice chairs of research to put emphasis on all these different areas that we need to make impact on. Sean will serve as the vice chair for basic science. Aijin Wang is serving as the vice chair for innovation, entrepreneurship, and translational work. Tina Palmieri is serving as the vice chair for clinical trials and the rigor that goes along with developing clinical trials that really answer questions. And the recruitment of Rachel Calcott, who, in addition to serving as the director of research for trauma, is also been tasked to serve as the vice chair for clinical science, including big data, health services research, outcomes work, and really putting that together, and is building her team to do that. So I met with our 4 vice chairs of research last week to task them with coming up with a strategic plan for research that came out of a department retreat about a year ago, and put us forward on the path to really be leaders in contributing to make these important activities. And it just so happens that this coincides with a renewed interest, I think brought by having a new dean here, in the activities around research on the campus and in our health system. So these slides really have all come from the dean and the Aggie Square leadership to talk about what's going on here, because it's actually pretty exciting. And I think it's going to completely, ultimately, change the character of and expand the mission, the research mission for our institution. So just a little bit of a background, and I want you to take a minute to think about this exercise. If you just think about what UC Davis might look like in 5 years, and particularly around its research mission, just think about that for a second and just write down a thought. What would you like to be a leader in? What you think is important? Because all of your ideas actually matter, because the place is here for us. Lots of directions that I can think this could go. So, how do we make this important? Lots of conversation about this. This is a book by John Cotter that talks about how to lead this kind of change. So how to diversify and grow the portfolio. So we're going to talk about where we are right now. So where is UC Davis on the sort of research hierarchy of other similar institutions? And then how do we think about how to move forward to make some differences? So here's a picture of all of UC Davis. So this is our partners across the causeway. The red line on top is UC Davis total. The thick blue line is the School of Medicine. And you can see that we were on a fairly steep trajectory, or at least an upward trajectory, in 2014, 15, 16, and then have kind of stagnated a bit in the last couple of years. The institution as a whole has gone up, and that's also been big leaders behind us are agriculture and the veterinary school. But the School of Medicine is a big percentage of the overall portfolio of the institution, which means they care about it as well. It speaks their language. So just to give you a little idea, again, so where have changes in funding gone? So agriculture has increased. Biologic sciences, which gets included in our School of Medicine numbers, have gone down. The School of Nursing looks completely fantastic, but that also has to do with the big delta in terms of School of Nursing didn't exist here till 2016 with a big grant from the Betty Irene Moore to develop a School of Nursing here. So that's relatively new in this area. So Blue Ridge rankings. How many of you have not heard of Blue Ridge rankings? So Blue Ridge rankings for our students is often, and our residents, is how institutions and departments are compared in NIH funding. It is strictly NIH funding. And as our Byrne colleagues remind us all the time, we have a lot of DOD funding, we have a lot of other funding, but Blue Ridge is sort of that NIH ranking, and it's a benchmark that schools use to compare themselves. What about NIH awards, since NIH is sort of the comparator? So it turns out UC Davis does reasonably well. We have about 230 investigators who have NIH awards. And if you look at the dollar per investigator, it's actually reasonably on par with our competitors, the other places. Now, if you look at Blue Ridge rankings, UCSF remains number one, but they also have about 3 times as many PIs doing investigation as we do. So we're just a smaller footprint of scientists, but our award per PI is not that far away. So the people who are doing work are doing good work, is I guess what I'm really trying to say here. But what makes an overall research portfolio of an institution? Just interesting to think about these things. So RO1s, so let's just look at Duke. Their distribution of RO1s to what are called big multi-PI or multi-group awards, U awards or P awards, program project grants, things like that you may have heard of, is different. So we have actually more RO1s than Duke as an individual, but they have many more percentage of U awards, multi-center or big grants. So it's just thinking about, so our percentage is 52 individual investigator RO1s, smaller percentage of U awards, and even a relatively smaller percentage of program project grants. So just interesting to find out where we are as an institution. And then how do we build the next generation of surgeon scientists? I'm actually proud to say that in our department, we have many new faculty who are on what are called K awards or training grants, sort of early protected time to think about research, and whether this is in health services research and outcomes work as being done by Lisa Brown in the thoracic division, or whether this is basic science work by other of our junior people. But we don't have very many K awards compared to other institutions. So that, I think, is an important thing to think about in terms of protecting our young faculty. And same with T awards, sorts of T32 are also training grants usually used at the level of surgical residents in our department, or for people who are fellows in internal medicine and other places. They do their research at the end of their clinical training. Some people actually think that that's a better way to do it, so that you can kind of keep going on that trajectory into your academic career. Okay, so just enough for the statistics. The goal here, so this again is UC Davis data, that most of our NIH funding is in like the old people, our full professors, senior folks, and not as much in our assistant professors or our associate professors. This is a trend at the NIH in general, that the average age for an NIH grant is somewhere in the 50s. For first awards in the late 40s or 50s, so it's late. And of course, surgeons, most of us don't finish our training until our late 30s. So it's just kind of interesting to see clinical trials. So clinical research, equally important, potentially even more important. The pediatric and internal medicine and HEMONC, so cancer trials are usually the highest percentage of trials, and where surgery is here. So that's just interesting to see kind of where we are compared to other departments. Not that we're competitive. The PI who have the most trials happens to be Marcio Malagalachlan, who is the PEDS HEMONC chief. I was surprised to see that he was first. But what was interesting is that 8 physicians are PIs on 25% of the trials. So it's kind of stuck in a few people, and how can we think about getting more people involved in clinical trials? So OR here means Office of Research, is very supportive of enhancing our large grant portfolio, and we'll be sending that, and there's going to be some initiatives around that. So the group, the research folks on campus, are seriously asking the question, what tangible things can we do to help? Well, one is help identify funding opportunities to say, hey, apply for this. Now, one of the things I often say to young faculty or residents putting in grant awards, it's really hard for surgeons to get turned down for a grant. Because we are not accustomed to trying to save 10 people on the hopes that one of them will die, one of them will live, right? We expect to win every time we go out of the gate. We expect that of ourselves. We expect that every single operation is going to be perfect. So it's very hard for surgeons to not take it personally when the paper gets rejected, when the grants get turned down. But other folks that do this more for a living really understand that it's a little bit of a game, and that you probably have to send out 10 awards to different places to get one, and that's okay. That it's going to be a match of who's doing the review versus what you're doing, and that there's a lot that's subjective into it. And often what you think is maybe not your best grant is the one that gets funded, and the one that you thought was fabulous doesn't get funded at all. And we can't be discouraged by that, but it really takes a different mindset than what we're accustomed to. So UC Davis is making a big commitment to helping people brainstorm about research concepts. They're hiring people to help with this activity, seed funding for proposal development, and grant writing support that we really should take advantage of. It's free for our investigators, so we should think about how to take advantage of that. And these are examples, it's pretty interesting, of some interdisciplinary research that has been sponsored throughout UC Davis through some of these sort of startup catalyst grants. I just thought this was pretty cool. I actually didn't know we had somebody that was doing NASA research on space habitats. I think that's pretty cool. I was glad to know we had that around here. I think we should think about doing surgery in space habitats. Someone should get excited about that and write a grant. And just lots of different, really sort of unique things that have come out of this. So again, more opportunities that are going to be available, and I'm happy to go over with any of this detail. Just to see what interdisciplinary projects do we have going on here, I was happy to see our own Kent Lloyd with the UC Davis Center for Precision Disease Modeling, and he can basically make a mouse with any disease you want. So, and he can surgically make a mouse, but he can genetically make a mouse with whatever you want. And that's sort of an interesting thing. So I do think there's a real opportunity for us to leverage that as well. Our colleagues in orthopedic surgery are developing a really nice training grant around musculoskeletal health. And I have tasked all of our vice chairs to develop a T32 in their domain within the next 5 years so that we can have a robust training program for the department. All right, so I just want to talk about COVID. COVID spurred a lot of interdisciplinary research and work, and there are a lot of grants. You all know we're doing clinical trials for vaccines. Dr. Calcutt is doing a clinical trial for treatment of patients with COVID-related ARDS, as well as ARDS from other sources with stem cells. And we've been very active in that space, and I think it has spurred the institution to realize we actually can figure out the machinery to do this and have patients on trials. I can tell you that if you go to the University of Michigan, you almost can't get into the hospital without being on a clinical trial. I had to have a screw taken out of my knee, and while a simple outpatient surgery, and while I was in the waiting room, they take advantage of that time where you're sitting there in the waiting room and you can't eat or drink, so you're kind of vulnerable. I was approached to participate in 3 different trials. At least there was someone to talk to, right? So I could be on a trial for, Tylenol versus something else for my post-op pain, some other pain thing, but 3 different trials for just having this little screw taken out of my knee, which took like 10 minutes. It's a different story why I had screws in my knee, but that was a skiing story. So they really do have a plan, strategic plan on how to do this. Investigators, incentivize them, develop industry partnerships, innovation and infrastructure, which is being developed. So one of the big emphasis is grow our own. I think the Department of Surgery has been thinking that for a long time. How do we grow our own? And that's why we actually have so many of almost every single division has somebody on a K award throughout the department here. And that's our goal. To support these people. Okay, incentivizing team science, industry partnerships. So I want to talk about industry partnerships before I segue at the last minute into what's going on at Aggie Square. Interesting, I actually didn't know this, that Novogene chose UC Davis as their North American headquarters. They're the largest commercial sequencing capacity of any company in the world, and one of the reasons they decided to, and a lot of these companies choose to locate in areas that have universities and undergraduate campuses, because it's a big source of people that, bright people that you can hire to work in these. So that's one of the arguments for developing our industry and public partnerships. It also brings economic development to your region. The PET CT scanner, I think everybody's heard about the Explorer. This was a partnership with a company that had developed this technology and needed people to sort of help bring it to clinical fruition, and partnered with 2 of our scientists, Simon Cherry, who's been here at UC Davis for quite a while. And then a variety of stimulus grants to develop innovative research. And infrastructure. Okay, so infrastructure, we talk about that a lot in the hospital, but research requires infrastructure too, requires space. I actually thought this was actually an interesting slide for me to see, to appreciate, that on the Sacramento campus, the Mind Institute is here, the Stem Cell Institute is here, and then surgery is the next largest group on Sacramento campus in terms of research space. So I feel very lucky that we have garnered that research space. I actually think this is even before we're borrowing the research space from internal medicine. I don't know for sure, because I actually am not sure I want to raise my head too much about this, because usually when somebody notices that you're out in front, you then become a target. But it was very sobering to see. And then it goes surgery, then it goes that company, then it goes radiology, chipper, Alzheimer's disease. We really are way out in front of many of our other colleagues. Okay, so we're going to work on space. The key is we need a lot more space. We need more space for mice. We need more space for doing all this research. And the facilities are pretty old. So that takes us to Aggie Square. And I know the faculty have heard conversation about Aggie Square a fair amount, but I don't think that the residents have a sense of sort of the excitement that's brewing on this campus to develop what I would call a more real campus-like feel. So what are the things we're missing when you think of a college campus? You know, we're missing places, we're missing a real gym, we're missing places for people to hang out, we're missing a coffee shop. You know, losing the black rhino, I think, was like the most tragic thing that's happened in the hospital since I've been here, which was the coffee shop from about 5 years ago now. So here are the existing research buildings. You know, this is the Ellison building, the ACC, where a lot of clinics are. Here's Shriners, here's the hospital, here's a poor little Cypress over there. It does have a footprint because that's where the stem cell research, the Alpha Clinic group is headquartered. And this is the footprint for Aggie Square, so you just know where it is. They've actually had the initial sort of ribbon cutting for the concept of getting this together. It's a public-private partnership, also with an important goal of contributing to the economic development of this part of Sacramento. Lots of work has been done around, you know, what are the things we want, the community development, the innovation and infrastructure that transforms both Davis and the Sacramento campus, and inclusion in economic development has been a big driver for this. So just the pictures are the main part, I think, of what's fun to look at in terms of, and how this will visually really transform our whole campus here. So here are the research buildings again. Here's the Marriott, you know, which currently is our only like social place on campus. It's like the only bar. And if assuming the life gets sort of back to normal, it's a place that you can recruit people, talk to folks. I mean, these are important parts in the lives of academics and an academic community. So one big footprint is going to be the food and health anchor there. And they've already been a commitment for the Alice Waters Institute for Edible Education. And a lot of UC Davis food and health initiatives are going to be focused out of there. And we have a commitment to have Sean's Center for Alimentary and Metabolic Science research group there. I got it right. CAMS we're working on for the acronym there, because you got to have, if you're going to have a research activity, you got to have an acronym. If you're going to have a trial, you got to have an acronym. I think the trauma guys started that. And nonetheless, that is a big piece of the infrastructure. Bioengineering and the partnership between bioengineering and our surgery departments, ours and orthopedics, is also sort of planned to be anchored there. The innovation infrastructure has a lot to do with what's called like an incubator place to put tech companies and scientists together to sort of see what one can develop. There's QB3 at UCSF is a similar idea for that. And then also a whole component of data science and digital health collaborations is anticipated to be there as well. So if you think about that for a minute, between our bioengineering footprint, our metabolism research footprint, and our big data footprint, we really have an opportunity to have the Department of Surgery pretty heavily represented in the Aggie Square vision. The public infrastructure is really important. The marketplace, stores, restaurants, shops, dry cleaners, laundry, you know, just stuff that is sort of part of life. Because you all need to get your scrubs dry cleaned, right? But is envisioned as part of this as well. Just, it's fun to see a picture of a clean lab. I actually don't know that these exist, but I love the artist's rendition of what a laboratory looks like. Like there's no stuff in there, but I love all the equipment, and what you notice is that everything is sort of modular, so the notion that it can be moved around. Open spaces so that people can interact with each other, which supports just cross-collaboration in various centers. This is an idea of some of the spaces that are sort of anticipated to be in that. And what you can see, and the reason I wanted to show the pictures and the vision, is really a notion of transforming this whole campus. At the same time, we think about how do we develop, bring jobs into the region and leverage the stuff that comes here. Okay, so industry partners, School of Medicine, innovation labs, all part of the vision here. This is kind of sort of a streetscape, which actually also gives you an idea of this as an open place where people are interacting and doing more things. It's not just trying to cut across the street between Shriners and the hospital, right? That's our main social activity here. Dangerous, however. So just kind of ending on the pictures and, of course, the ultimate goal here. Space, match our needs, infrastructure for successful funding, incentives for team science, all with the notion of developing innovation around here. All right, so I think I'm going to stop here and just ask for a minute before I open it up for a little bit of discussion. Somebody to volunteer and say at the beginning of this, when they wrote down what they'd like to see, thoughts about research in the future, what were some things that were priorities for any of you? I saw some writing down over here. Did you guys come up with? I saw it. Groundbreaking. I know it's going to be groundbreaking.
I basically just said to utilize our resources to both explore new frontiers in medicine and to ensure equity with technology that already exists.
I love that. Dr. Brown, did you have any thoughts? You're a big thinker kind of guy. I said big thinker.
I think two things. One, I have had success with grant coaching groups where you meet on a schedule like every 2 weeks with sort of anticipated deadlines in mind and review sort of, you know, what you've written among the group, because there's a certain amount of accountability with it, and it's very, it's productive. Two, I think that divisional M&M meetings tend to be a very rich source of questions that is underutilized. We don't design the M&M meeting to, you know, be a scientific harvest or anything. It's got a different purpose, but that's when I tend to find the most inspiration for questions, and it could be further developed for that.
I think that's a brilliant comment, divisional M&Ms. Usually, I can remember saying, hey, somebody should write that up, or hey, somebody should look that up, or oh my gosh, how do we do that? So absolutely, I agree 100%. I also think you have to learn about yourself. Are you the person who needs coaching and deadlines? Are you the person who just hunkers down and does it yourself, but nobody else ever gets the chance to look at it? Do you not get it out the door because you think it needs to be perfect? A lot of self-analysis on how do you get work done. Dr. Hiroshi.
I'd like to say two things. First, thanks for bringing up the point of Aggie Square. For those of you that don't really see this, you should go visit Mission Bay at UCSF at some point, because 5 years ago the place was a wasteland, and it was terrible, actually. In fact, 6 years ago, or 10 years ago, when they moved the laboratories down there, everyone was like, no one wanted to go. It was terrible. And now it's where everyone wants to be, and it's really an incredibly amazing, thriving community of a mixture of clinical and work and research work, and it's just amazing what's happened. They even have like this food truck area that's relatively permanent that people go, hey, hang out at. It's really one of these projects that I think exceeded everyone's expectations. And just so you guys all know, the reason that hospital exists is because Dr. Farmer ramrodded it through at UCSF. Because without her, that's no exaggeration. It would not have happened if she hadn't been screaming at people for about 15 years.
Yeah.
Maybe yelling, not screaming.
No. Strategically communicating.
Yeah. I was in those meetings. It was.
All right, down.
I really think, for me personally, and I love this talk, because really the biggest thing I think is that there's a lot of awesome stuff going on at UCD, but no one knows what the hell's happening. and it's all happening in little silos and stuff. And I think the critical part to these kind of environments is making it multidisciplinary and having people interact not just on a work basis, but on a social basis and be co-located. And that kind of thing really breeds real innovation. I think that our sort of aw shucks, we're just country doctors attitude really has to be shed. And we need to sort of move into the future and innovate and collaborate with industry and make things happen fresh and new here.
Yeah, we're on the way. This is great. Dr. Ginger.
Yeah. Sorry I was a bit late. I wanted to echo some of what Dr. Hirosi's saying, because after my 2 years on the main campus, everyone I met, particularly through the data lab and the genome center, was so excited to have somebody from UC Davis Health. Like, I have been dying to collaborate with the Med Center. Oh, what are you working on? And so I think it would have been great to say, oh, meet me in Aggie Square. Let's have a burger or whatever. And, if we build it, they're ready to come. So I think it's really exciting.
Has anybody also noticed, thanks, Laura, for I can't believe we just did that. Has anybody noticed the electric bus that is now being run twice a day between main campus and UC Davis? Now, really bad timing to start a new bus system, right? We're all, could we have gotten more unlucky with that one? But it is still running all the time. And in fact, I think it's going to be a game changer in terms, because you can get work done on the Wi-Fi, you'll just be a minute to be able to make those kinds of changes. So I think that will help with our collaboration. Plus, out of COVID, I think we've learned that Zoom is actually really an easy way to communicate with people as well. Dr. Schatz.
So you started out saying that our primary mission is clinical, and that's part of the problem with trying to get research done, because we're all 90% busy with clinical stuff. So what we need is that support staff. I can have a bunch of ideas, but I need somebody to run with them and to develop. We have some people in trauma now that can do the IRBs and some consent, but to get more structure behind us to be able to run with those ideas, we can do a whole lot more research. I missed a deadline on my plan was a $400,000 DoD grant because I had no one to help me on a short notice to write this grant.
So this is where I have specifically tasked our 4 vice chairs, which is why we have 4, not just 1, to really look at what are the infrastructure needs and invest the money that we have saved over the last couple of years to do just that, to facilitate that. I know Dr. Calcutt is developing some outstanding recommendations for the infrastructure around clinical science, and what are the kind of people we need and where do we need them. We also have invested, each division now has a junior specialist who's just a person who can help do all kinds of things, and we should take advantage of that. Yes.
I think for me, one thing that appeared to be missing was a way to facilitate collaboration with the School of Veterinary Medicine. You pointed out that the number one source of funding for UC Davis is going to be the School of Medicine. Right behind us is the School of Veterinary Medicine. And I just think it would make so much sense to facilitate more One Health ventures with them, because at the end of the day, it is both medicine.
So, of course, the veterinary school is one of the main things that makes UC Davis unique. The nearest place you can go is Cornell, but the med school is in New York, and Cornell is up in Ithaca. That's quite a far ways apart if you don't know New York. So it really is a huge opportunity. I want to applaud Dr. Cantor, who has his T32, just got one of those training grants. That is a partnership between the School of Veterinary Medicine and the Cancer Center and his work, and also Aijin Wang, who has a trial in bulldogs with our spina bifida stuff, and has been leveraging sort of the large animal work as well as the veterinary collaboration. Dr. Adams.
I feel nervous. Yeah, the other thing too, kind of echoing some of this, Diana, is I would love to see our growing area, CAMS, and the group over there kind of being a focal point for geeks, meaning that a lot of folks in the room are very, very busy and have a lot of great ideas, and we want to go and understand what was going on in the clinics and so on. But I'd like to have everyone see us as a resource, to have that cup of coffee and come connect and maybe even start to form some sort of PhD, MD dyads, of collaboration, because I see that's part of our role too, to help and maybe provide that infrastructure. And then to the veterinary question too, if we can get this new recruit, she's a veterinarian, so that would be a great connection, I think, also to the UC Davis Vet School. So we're very open to that. So come visit us as we grow.
Fantastic. I think this is really, having Dr. Wang as a bioengineer has really helped us, enhance our relationships with the whole School of Bioengineering and so I'm going to I see Dr. Calcutt coming to the microphone, and then I want to introduce our sort of Aggie Square in residence guru who's been with us for a year as well, Jane Austin.
Great talk. I just wanted to put my health system hat on as the Chief Research Informatics Officer and let everyone know that there is an enormous build-out being done around data access, which has been a problem here for people to do clinical research. And so there's a whole infrastructure that we're building out that is rolling out over the next sort of year time period in different phases to both access the data as well as get support to be able to do that type of research.
Thanks, Rachel. And I think the message is that the Department of Surgery is sort of evolving at the same time the School of Medicine is investing in infrastructure. So if we can marry those two, we have a place to go. So Dr. Alston finished her general surgery training at UCSF, did an MBA, and has been I'll have you grab the microphone behind you there so that our people from the outside can hear, has been with us for this year, spending half of her time involved sort of with the Aggie Square enterprise and just being part of the early stages of thinking of how to make this industry academic partnership. So, Jane.
Thank you. So as Dr. Farmer said, I am a general surgeon here working in Dr. Ali's division. So I'll see some of you. I also do some work out at Kaiser, so I also see the residents out there. And then working part-time under Jim Kovach in the Office of Entrepreneurship and Translational. Oh no, we just changed the name. It was the Office of Entrepreneurship and Industry Alliances. It's now the Office of Translational Entrepreneurship, directly under the School of Medicine. And so our function is twofold. Initially, a big part of the focus was the Aggie Square project, but as the developers were named and sort of kicked the ball and ran with it in terms of figuring out how to allocate space, we got sort of moved over more under the School of Medicine umbrella, and our mission is twofold. One, to support faculty entrepreneurs. There's definitely a lot of, I think, interest in collaboration across campus from Sacramento to UC Davis. As someone else mentioned, between us and the vet school. We are deeply involved. I'm new to UC Davis, but working under Jim, have been exposed to all kinds of people across the campus, and we did a lot of collaborative projects with regard to COVID-19. And so if people want introductions, if I don't know the right person to go to, I'm happy to find the right person for you to go to facilitate that. And as Dr. Farmer emphasized with the slide deck, Aggie Square will be a big part of that, just being co-located in the same space. Will be a huge part of that. Briefly about the resources that they're envisioning, we were initially told it was going to be a proper structured incubator, but it seems like actually the CIC space is going to be more like a WeWork type setting where faculties who have startups can rent or lease space on a month-to-month basis, and they basically have all the things that entrepreneurs need, i.e. access to food and caffeine and conference space and a lot of Wi-Fi capabilities. And then the venture cafe piece is separate, but is always co-located in all these like Wexford developments. And their goal is really building out this sense of community. So getting folks who are local entrepreneurs outside the med center, within the med center, across the different schools, all in the same place. And they do some structured programming to support general areas that an entrepreneur may need help with. For folks in the life sciences space, it ends up being a lot of regulatory work, business strategy, customer acquisition, and then they also pull in the resources that are unique to the area. So in our case, probably the med center as well as the veterinary and the ag school. And then they also have some open mic nights. So they let people bring up their projects, research and or entrepreneurial in nature, and literally just get up, introduce themselves, tell what they're working on, and ask for help in a given area. And that's meant to facilitate communication and collaboration across the campuses. So I think it'll be a huge pull, and we're really excited. Sounds like they're going to break ground in late Q1, maybe more like early Q2. We look forward to seeing once they have all the space allocated where things will go. But as Dr. Farmer said, there will be space for UCD, there will be space for research, there will also be space the developers are leasing directly to industry. And so there's a plan for both wet lab and dry lab space for training and education as well.
Thanks, Jane. So as you point out, Aggie Square is going to break ground way before the new hospital tower is going to break ground. So this will be transformative in terms of the campus, and really something that I think will also help attract residents and students and people to UC Davis in a way that we haven't before. Really build out the Sacramento campus. So it's really an exciting time to be here. And even if you might not be here when it happens, or you're an intern who's thinking about what research you might want to do, it will have an impact on the culture of our place that matters. I just want to take a minute to say two things: that it's also being very well thought out in terms of leveraging the cultural diversity that we have at UC Davis and in Sacramento, and paying attention to how can we help bolster our neighboring community that is part of this effort. And there's a lot of effort. That's why you saw the mayor. There's a lot of partnership with people figuring out how to do this right. And the component of social services research that is another important part of our mission is not lost on this development activity. So I think that was just an important part for people to be aware of. And part of the sort of dry lab research that the goal is to lead out of this center has to do with how do we make sure that healthcare is equitably delivered across our campus and our region. And with that, I just want to make an announcement that this Friday at 5:30, led in part by our Surgeons for Social Responsibility group, and partnership with the efforts that have been put forward by the Department of Emergency Medicines around the country for getting out the vote, and other people in the medical school and just doctors throughout the region, will be at 5:30 on the state capitol, a memorial rally honoring Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her commitment to equal rights for all people. And that'll be at 5:30. More information to come on Friday at the Capitol steps. Some of it may be Zoom, sort of combination hybrid in-person activity, and we'll get more information for people who are interested in that activity as well. So with that, I think we'll draw the data and end, and have a good week.